Chapter 1281, Leaving Harmonious Morus Alba, the Fifth Spirit Ascension. The fifth row. The 79th position. At the instant Su Ming touched it and fused with it, his aura filled the entire world in an unprecedented manner. The ground trembled, and the fog tumbled. 5 spirit dissension halls descended around Su Ming. The all-spirits were still before him, shining brightly compared to the dull spirit dissension halls. Su Ming fused with the ancestral spirit. Several hours later, when the ancestral spirit in front of him disappeared from his position in the 5th row, an astonishing, mighty pressure erupted from Su Ming's body. It was so strong that it instantly caused all the ancestral spirits beneath the 5th row to lower their heads together. The all-spirits hall in the sky became dimmer, and the spirit dissension halls became barely discernible, as if they could not withstand the great pressure from Su Ming. His strength was unprecedented. At that moment, he might seem to have only had his spirit ascend 5 times, but in truth, he had already ascended 6 times. In fact, when Su Ming returned to Arid Triad and went to All Spirits Hall there, he would have his spirit ascend 10 times. He would then be in existence who surpassed the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe. In fact, if Su Ming, with his current power, gathered his will and cultivation base together, then he would have reached a state at which he could stand on equal grounds with the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe. In fact, in some sense, Su Ming had already surpassed the old man. Su Ming's expression was calm. He closed his eyes in midair and did not choose to continue having his spirit ascend, because he could feel that he had reached a state of fullness again. He knew that this was his limit as of then. If he went through his 6th spirit ascension, it would be impossible for him to succeed. If he wanted to succeed again, he needed to return to Arid Triad and turn the Emperor of Abyss True World into his own will. With the wills of 4 true worlds gathered on his person, Su Ming would have the confidence to go through his 6th and 7th spirit ascensions. After a long while, Su Ming opened his eyes. There was a sparkle of life in his gaze. All his aura was kept in his body, which made him appear immortal, but when he stood there, he looked as if the entire world served as a background for him. In truth, this would not be the only place where this would happen. At that moment, no matter where Su Ming was, the world where he was located would bow down and worship him. His state of being had already surpassed that of a true world, and he was only second to Arid Triad and Harmonious Morus Alba. Perhaps, there had been quite a number of cultivators who were stronger than Su Ming during the various eras in the passage of time. But besides Arid Triad, there was no other person who could reach Su Ming's state of being during the countless years the universe had existed. In this aspect, Su Ming was already near the peak. It would be difficult for him to find an opponent unless he ran into old monsters who had hidden themselves incredibly well in Saint Defire and Dark Dawn. Only they might be able to fight against Su Ming. Besides those select few people, only the powerful warriors of the previous eras who could only wake up 100 years before the disaster could catch Su Ming's attention. Those people had lived for far too long, and their power had accumulated to an incredibly terrifying degree. They were existences who could not be destroyed by the disaster, so only they had the right to be regarded with importance by Su Ming. After all, Su Ming was now the same as them. They were complete and imperishable even in the face of disaster, but Su Ming did not want to be in existence gasping for the last breaths of his life. He did not want everything by his side to be destroyed, and did not want to roar at the skies while he held a corpse in his arms, just like what the secrets of the universe had showed him. What he wanted was to change all of that. In silence, Su Ming swung his arm, and the golden light in the sky disappeared. The All-Spirits Hall vanished, and the world returned to normal. Su Ming took a step forward with a calm expression. He disappeared from the world, and when he reappeared, he had already returned to true immortal sect world. It's time for me to leave this place and return to true morning Tao world. Su Ming lifted his head to look at the direction of bright young vortex, and when he muttered these words to himself faintly, he took a step forward. With one step, the true world started rotating in reverse. Since true immortal sect world belonged to Su Ming, as long as Su Ming sent his will outwards to any spot in this true world, he would be able to reach the place he wanted in an instant. He stared at the continuously rotating bright young vortex before turning into a long arc. He entered the vortex and disappeared without a trace. Su Ming was so quick while moving through the vortex that he surpassed his previous speed by several times. It could be said that before he entered Harmonious Morus Alba Expanse Cosmos, While Su Ming was strong, his strength was still limited, but at that moment, he had surpassed his previous self numerous times, regardless of whether it was in terms of his will or his cultivation base. The difference between his current self and past self was like the sky and earth. If the previous Su Ming ran into a cultivator in Avacania realm, he could fight against them, albeit with great difficulty, but right then, those in Avacania realm were nothing to him. Only if they were people who had already gained incredibly high attainments in Avacania realm would they be able to make Su Ming slightly serious. An average cultivator in Avacania realm. Well, Su Ming might not have tested it out, but he wondered how many breaths it would take to kill them. Su Ming kept on charging through the vortex, which did not have any sort of suction force. It did not matter whether it came from above or if it was the mighty pressure from below, for all of them were extremely weak before Su Ming. He did not even need to touch them with his own body. He only needed to have his will spread out from him, and all of it would immediately be crushed and broken down in just a few breaths. Su Ming had already closed in on the spot where he had initially stood against the antecedental spirit's disaster. At the instant he passed by the place, he came to a swift stop. He examined the area quietly, and a gloomy look gradually appeared on his face. He could sense a faint wave of aura of death. It did not belong to the world in the vortex, but to someone Su Ming was familiar with, the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe. He failed. Su Ming sighed softly. In truth, once he learned of the truth about Arid Triad, he already knew that even if the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe wanted to take revenge on the Arid disaster, it would be impossible for him to succeed. As he shook his head, Su Ming turned to leave, but his expression suddenly changed. He lifted his right hand and seized the air towards the vortices on his right. With it, the sky in the vortex that hung over 3000th world instantly turned dark. It was covered by Su Ming's palm, which now hung above an ocean world. Once the sky turned into Su Ming's palm, he swiftly seized what was below. As the ocean shuddered, it instantly broke down to reveal a drop of blood within it. When Su Ming caught it and was about to pull his hand back, a red bolt of lightning swiftly charged down at his palm. This was the antecedental spirit's disaster. At the moment the red bolt of lightning approached him, Su Ming raised his right index finger and flicked it away. With a loud bang, the lightning bolt crumbled. Su Ming's right hand was completely unharmed. When he pulled his arm back from the 3000th world, the drop of blood was completely unharmed while it lay in his palm. Su Ming could sense the mark of life belonging to the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe. With the drop of blood around, the old man from Heavenly Spirit Tribe would not have truly died. If he fused with his other self in harmonious Morus Alba Expanse Cosmos, there might be a chance for him to be resurrected. Su Ming closed his fingers and put away the drop of blood before he turned into a long arc that charged towards Yin Death Vortex. He rushed forward, drawing closer to the exit. Swiftly, he got closer and closer to Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos and True Morning Tao World. Chapter 1282, You Have to Fight for Your Own Life. Arid Triad Expanse Cosmos, True Morning Tao World. At that moment, around the land originally belonging to Morning Tao World that was used for the 9th Summit were countless cultivators from Saint Defire and Dark Dawn. They had surrounded the 100-something cores of the runes hidden in space. Right at the center of those cultivators was a distortion in space that was about 100,000 feet wide. Mountains, rivers, land, and floating continents could be vaguely seen there. That was where the 9th Summit was located. That distortion of 100,000 feet wide was a gap the cultivators from Saint Defire and Dark Dawn were going to forcibly tear open. Once it was created, the cultivators from Saint Defire and Dark Dawn could instantly tear through space like a swarm of bees, and step into the dimension where Morning Tao Sect was originally located and where 9th Summit currently was. As space distorted, from the distance, it looked as if the incredibly fragile spot had countless lightning sparks swimming in it. This sort of attack had lasted for a very long time, but during the past 3 days, due to the appearance of 9 faceless men in white robes, the attacks reached their climax. The 9 people dressed in white robes had incredibly bizarre faces. There was nothing on them. They had no eyes and no other features. They were just like white jade slips. The 9 gave off the feeling as if they did not have any sort of cultivation base and were just like mortals, but the mighty pressure spreading out from them was incredibly shocking. By the way the cultivators around them glanced at them, anyone with eyes could see the respect they had for those 9 people. The 9 were dressed in white robes, but there were slight differences in their robes. 5 of them had the mark of the moon, and the other 4 the mark of the sun. They stood next to the edge of the distorted area. They did not use any sort of divine abilities, but if anyone took a closer look, they would be able to see that the fluctuations of the distortions were the strongest in this area. The distortions in space were the final layer of the runes Xianxia had laid out, but, due to the 9 people's existence, the space in the rune distorted and became faint. In fact, if anyone stood in the distance and looked, they would have a very strong feeling that the 9 people were like nails. It looked like the 9 people were nails that had struck the final layer of the rune Xianxia had set beyond 9th summit. It was also precisely because of them that the rune constantly grew weaker. Standing behind the 9 were the cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier, and some distance away from them was a sea of white bones levitating in space. It was not located too far away, and it allowed whoever was on it to be able to see everything in the battlefield. Leaning against a bone among the large number of white bones was a long-haired man in black robes. He had a handsome face and was filled with a strange presence. In his hands he held a wine cup, from which he would occasionally take a sip, as if all the effects this particular galaxy had on him were so incredibly weak that they might as well have not existed. Around the black-robed man were 10 black-robed people standing respectfully, who looked like guards. They were coldly staring at the distortions in space. The black-robed man smiled faintly. He took a sip of his wine before he said, "Interesting. In just one more day, the rune will shatter, and we'll torture the cultivators there slowly while they writhe in despair. Once we kill them after that, their souls will taste even better." The man was so strong that even if he did not send his aura outwards, he could make it seem as if space could not bear with his presence. Signs of its destruction continuously appeared around him. Needless to say, he was the strongest person who had descended in Arid Triad from Saint Defier and Dark Dawn's camp sovereign of Dawn Yangpei, one of the 3 sovereigns of Dark Dawn. However, the person currently sitting on the bones was not the sovereign's real form, but one of his 2 great clones. At the instant his real form descended, he headed off somewhere, though no one knew where he went. One of his clones remained in True Morning Dao World, while the other went to the mysterious 4th True World. They might be just clones, but they had also reached Avacania Realm, or else it would be impossible for Yangpei to be known as one of the sovereigns of Dark Dawn. While the sovereign of Dawn Yangpei drank his wine and watched the rune of the 9th summit contort in the distance, no one, including the sovereign of Dawn Yangpei, noticed a figure standing in the space on the other side of the contorting 100,000 feet rune. The person was watching all of them coldly. Su Ming had come almost 2 hours ago. This was his true world, so nothing in it could escape his grasp. In fact, Su Ming only needed to think, and he could move to any region he wanted. Once he walked out of Yin Death Vortex, he immediately knew everything that had happened in True Morning Dao World. He did not chase away the cultivators from Saint Defier or Dark Dawn. Su Ming only stood quietly in space and watched the contorting rune of the 9th summit while it was continuously attacked. When Su Ming reached his current level of cultivation and possessed the wills of 3 great true worlds, all lives became simply a part of the universe rising and falling in his eyes. If someone lived, then someone else had to die, and only if someone died would someone else get to live. This was a law. Su Ming did not want to change it, and he would not interfere with it too much. It did not matter whether it was Dark Dawn or Saint Defier, for both of them belonged to Arid Triad. It was just that as of current, they had moved from Arid Triad's 2nd world to his 1st. Based on what Su Ming could sense due to becoming a higher state of being and understanding more things, the feeling that his world was being invaded by Arid Triad had diminished greatly. All of it was a plan by Arid Triad to eventually invade Harmonious Morus Alba and completely possess it. All lives were chess pieces. Even if some of them believed that they had become players, on the larger scale of things, they were still only chess pieces in other people's eyes. This was a sad truth, but also a form of law. If you don't go through storms and blizzards, how can you possibly grow? If you don't go through trials, how can you rise to glory? If you don't go through life and death situations, you are just like an unsharpened sword. Su Ming stared at 9th summit with a calm expression. He could stop all of this from happening and could make it so that not a single life from 9th summit was lost. He could put a complete stop to this disaster. But what was the use in doing all of that? Even if Su Ming could put a stop to this disaster and the next and even the 3rd, there would still be one disaster in the end which he could not stop. Those who were protected would never be able to grow up. Only those who experienced life and death situations, difficulties, and trials would have powerful spirits and strength. Only such a person would be able to stand their ground and support the world on their own. It was exactly what he had told to the berserkers. At that moment, Su Ming quietly watched everything that happened before him, because he wanted Ninth Summit to go through a trial. This was a battle, and there would be more battles they would have to face in the future. If Ninth Summit and the berserkers wanted to get used to living through battles as well as survive in the world of cultivators, where the strong preyed on the weak, then had to experience every trial in existence. If they could not get used to it, then Su Ming would attack and provide a protection that would give them no future but allow them to remain for some 500 years. At that time, the disaster would arrive. If Su Ming succeeded, then all would be good, but if he did not, it would be fine as well. Everything would probably be reduced to nothingness. They had to fight for their own lives, for the ones provided by others might not be what they truly wanted. Su Ming never understood this in the past, but right then, he did. Perhaps it would hurt. Perhaps there would be quite a large number of people who would die. But this was the path that had to be taken if a person wanted to become a powerful warrior. The only thing he could do was make the battle a little fairer. Su Ming could not increase the levels of cultivation for the cultivators in Ninth Summit and the berserkers in an instant, but he could suppress the levels of cultivation of those from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier, so that their levels of cultivation would match those from Ninth Summit. Su Ming. This was very easy. When the day went by and an astonishing bang filled the entire galaxy, the ferocious roars from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier served as the accompaniment for it. The sound came from the last rune Hu Zi had set for Ninth Summit breaking down. At the instant it collapsed, a large number of cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier instantly charged into the gap leading to Ninth Summit, which was created when the rune broke down. Once the rune crumbled, hundreds of thousands of cultivators gathered in Ninth Summit. They squared their shoulders and prepared to fight against the cultivators charging towards them with the killing intent boiling in them from their willingness to fight back and struggle. At that time, there was still no one who was worthy of seeing Su Ming in true Morning Dao world. He lifted his right hand and casually pushed in the direction of the cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier. With it, all of true Morning Dao world shuddered. The tremors were quiet, but they formed an indescribably great mighty pressure that descended in space, causing true Morning Dao world to immediately become much heavier. It made the hearts of all the cultivators from Saint Defier and Dark Dawn tremble. They came to an abrupt halt, and shock appeared on their faces. All the cultivators felt as if they had become several times heavier, causing all of them to feel heavy and sluggish. In fact, they had a feeling that the circulation of their cultivation base was no longer smooth. It was as if all of true Morning Dao world was pressing on them at that moment. Once the rune crumbled, the hundreds of thousands of cultivators from Ninth Summit jolted as well. Shock appeared on their faces, and all of them stopped instead of rushing out. As the cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier were shocked, the 9 white-robed, faceless people shuddered violently. There were roars echoing in their bodies, and they looked as if they were fighting against something. Further into the distance were the 10 black-robed men around Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei. All of their expressions had changed drastically. Their pupils had shrank, and a bright, brilliant light shone in their eyes. The Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei had his wine cup lifted and was about to taste the wine when he stopped moving. He lifted his head slowly, and a ferocious look appeared at the corners of his lips. Which fellow Daoist has descended and disturbed this true world's will, making it suppress us? You, what gave you the courage to stand against those of us from Dark Dawn? How dare you provoke me? The Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei's voice was ghastly. When it rang out in the air, the entire galaxy trembled violently. The mighty pressure that descended in the area even showed signs of lessening. The Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei still held the wine cup in his left hand while his right hand was on the white bone by the side. A dark green light appeared in his eyes. It swept through the entire galaxy, but he could find nothing. Chapter 1283. Now, it's fair. As the Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei's voice spread out, quite a large amount of the mighty pressure that had descended in true Morning Dao world scattered. This was the astonishing divine sense formed by the Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei's power of Avacania realm. When it swept past the area, it became a power that could shock all cultivators. When the cultivators from Dark Dawn felt a bit of the pressure on their bodies lift, zealousness appeared on their faces. They knew that their sovereign was nearby and watching them. They had the confidence that as long as their sovereign was around, there was nothing in the world that could stop them. All existences were to either die or flee under the mighty pressure of Dark Dawn. They were confident that there was no other choice for any enemy of theirs. The shocked hearts of the cultivators from Saint Defire also gradually became calm as the pressure on their bodies lessened. They were not from the same camp as Dark Dawn, but they still believed wholeheartedly that the only ones in the world who could fight against Dark Dawn was Saint Defire. As for the 9 white-robed, faceless men, they felt their hearts relax. A ferocious expression replaced their shock, and during that instant, a great power erupted from their bodies. But it was not the power of a cultivation base, but the will of antecedental spirits. They were known as Supreme Paragons, and their statuses were only second to the Sovereigns of Dawn and Lord Saint Defire. They were the antecedental spirits from Dark Dawn and Saint Defire. The 10 black-robed men beside the Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei also felt the pressure on them lighten. Soon, a monstrous cultivation base erupted from their bodies. Those 10 people were each infinitesimally close to Avacania realm. A cold sneer appeared at the corners of the Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei's lips. He was confident that he was invincible in this true world. Even if he ran into any antecedental spirits from arid triad expanse cosmos, he was confident that he could destroy the world, because he was in Avacania realm and because he was the Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei. You overestimate yourself. Begone from this place. Do not show even a single hint of your aura where I stand, or else no matter who you are and who you are affiliated to, I will not mind having another spirit slave by my side. Cultivators of Dark Dawn and Saint Defire, destroy 9th Summit. I want this sect to be completely wiped out, the Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei said faintly. His voice instantly echoed in all of true Morning Dao world, and he placed the wine cup in his left hand by the corner of his lips. There was a hint of arrogance and casualness to him as he took a sip of his wine. But the instant the small sip of wine entered the Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei's mouth, Su Ming had a calm look on his face. He did not even cast a glance at the Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei in the distance. To him, this so-called Sovereign of Dawn was nothing. He pushed his right hand down again. The previous push was just Su Ming slightly suppressing the cultivators. Right then, he made true Morning Dao world heavier by 1-fold. The moment he did so, ripples appeared out of nowhere in true Morning Dao world. As they spread out, they filled up all of true Morning Dao world in the blink of an eye, and a presence belonging to another true world instantly descended. That was true immortal sect world. Su Ming's suppression was in truth a form of a seal. He sealed the power of the people from Dark Dawn and Saint Defire who surpassed those from 9th Summit, and the principle of this seal was to make true Morning Dao world heavy. The easiest method to achieve this was to make another true world appear in this place. Once it fused with true Morning Dao world, it would naturally become heavier. As true immortal sect world descended, muffled booms echoed in space. Ripples spread out, and true Morning Dao world instantly became heavier. This heaviness was difficult to describe with words, but it made all the cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defire to instantly tremble violently. Their bodies sank downwards. Banging sounds rang out continuously from their bodies, and 3/10 of their cultivation bases were instantly suppressed. That was 3/10 of every single person's cultivation base, including the 9 white-robed, faceless antecedental spirits. Under the pressure of the weight, their bodies shuddered, and 3/10 of their wills as antecedental spirits were also suppressed. Preposterous! The Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei's expression changed, but the moment he opened his mouth, the wine cup in his hand shattered into pieces with a bang. The wine spilled out and levitated in front of him. The sea of white bones around him shuddered. Signs of it becoming loose appeared, and the 10 black-robed men roared together. They shuddered and immediately circulated their cultivation bases to fight against the pressure, but it was useless. 3/10 of each of their cultivation bases were suppressed. In shock, the Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei had killing intent appear in his eyes. His power in Avacania realm was completely released. It formed a huge whirlwind, and when it rotated around him with loud booms, it spread out in all directions. Wherever it went, all the mighty pressure disappeared, and during that instant, the sovereign of Dawn Yangpei stood up slowly from his seat on the sea of white bones. He swung his right hand, and a bone spear immediately appeared in his hand. Once he held it, his cultivation base erupted from his body again. "Since you're asking for death, I will fulfill your wish. Show yourself, you rascal who only knows how to hide." As he spoke, the sovereign of Dawn Yangpei took a step forward. Before his foot landed, a white light the color of bone erupted from the bone spear in his right hand, and it immediately covered all of True Morning Dao world. The light spanned an impossible distance while forming an endless amount of bone spears that were impossible to count and which filled every corner of True Morning Dao world. It seemed that if the sovereign of Dawn Yangpei wanted to destroy all the lives in this true world, it would only take a single thought from him. But right when the sovereign of Dawn's foot was about to land, he did not see Su Ming finishing his last push with his right hand with an indifferent expression on his face. The entire process was in truth just Su Ming lifting his right hand and pushing down. At the instant he completed the process, True Sky Hill world descended. As it went down, ripples surged through True Morning Dao world. They intersected with each other and spread out as forming a huge net that was formed by the fusion of three great true worlds. The mighty pressure formed from it was equivalent to three great true worlds descending at the same time, and the heaviness was the same. Almost in an instant, practically all the cultivators from Saint Defier and Dark Dawn coughed up a mouthful of blood. All of them felt as if there were 100,000 mountains pushing on them. Their souls were suppressed, causing 6/10 of their cultivation bases to become dull, as if they had been sealed. They could only bring out 4/10 of their cultivation bases. In fact, there were quite a few people who had their levels of cultivation fall, especially the 9 white-robed, faceless antecedental spirits. As their bodies trembled, their features returned to their blank faces, as if the power that could allow them to cover their faces had been forcibly torn from them. Since they were antecedental spirits, the effects of the mighty pressure on them seemed to be stronger. They coughed up blood and staggered backwards. As they did so, 6/10 of their cultivation bases were suppressed as well. The 10 black-robed people around Yang Pei coughed up blood too. Their levels of cultivation immediately fell, and they exuded a relatively weak presence. They were no exceptions to this. 6/10 of each of their powers were suppressed. A trickle of blood flowed out from the sovereign of Dawn's mouth. Ruthlessness appeared on his face. He was about to throw the long spear in his hand, but when he was about to put his right foot down and began to speak in a ferocious voice, he only managed to say this one word before his expression changed swiftly. His eyes went wide, and the ruthlessness on his face instantly disappeared. For the first time ever, it was replaced by shock, because at the moment the wills of the three great true worlds descended, his body felt as if it had been crushed by something, causing blood to appear at the corners of his lips. But this was still nothing to him. What really caused the Sovereign of Dawn to feel shocked was how he could sense the gaze looking at him from directly across him in the distance. That gaze was filled with an aloofness that he had never seen before, and there was an air of nobility that was difficult to describe with words within it. It was the strongest will in the entire true world, and with just one faint glance, he made the Sovereign of Dawn Yangpei feel as if his body was about to crumble. This was a feeling that he had never sensed even when he went to the deity's mausoleum, which was a place where even the sovereigns of Dawn had to come to worship once every millennium. It was something he only sensed when faced with the three strongest slumbering bodies among all of the others who had existed for an unknown amount of time. According to the legends of Dark Dawn, the three slumbering people were true old monsters who had survived through the disasters an unknown number of eras ago. "Sir!" The heart of Sovereign of Dawn Yangpei trembled. His expression was one of shock, and even with his level of control over his emotions, he found it hard to hide it. Just as he was about to speak, a faint voice came from behind him. "Did you say that I was asking for death just now?" The voice had appeared incredibly suddenly, making Yang Pei shudder. He was about to explain himself on instinct when the voice spoke again. "Sit. Stay with me and watch this life and death trial. Your people are pretty good, but the situation is a little unfair." Yes. The Sovereign of Dawn Yangpei did not have the right or the courage to refuse. All his thoughts turned into this one word in the end, and it was filled with respect. In fact, he did not even dare to turn his head around. He put away the bone spear, and with his heart pounding in nervousness, he slowly sat down. The hearts of the 10 black-robed men beside the sea of bones shuddered in fear. They retrieved their aura and tried to be as respectful as they could, not daring to sneak a peek in Su Ming's direction. Strength was everything. But now, it is fair. You can fight now, Su Ming said calmly and sat on the seat originally belonging to the Sovereign of Dawn on the Sea of Bones. He leaned back against it, and with his right hand supporting his forehead, he stared at Ninth Summit. The Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei sat up straight beneath him. Anguish appeared on his face while he stared at the cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier and mulled over what Su Ming had said. He had already understood that this person wanted to use his people to train those from Ninth Summit. Well, Su Ming cast a glance at the Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei. Yang Pei's heart shuddered. He sensed the displeasure from the person behind him. He then gritted his teeth and sent his order as the Sovereign of Dawn to the cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier far in the distance. Step into Ninth Summit and fight. Roars reverberated through space during that instant. It did not matter whether the cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier were willing or not, for even if they had 6/10 of their power sealed, the Sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei had already given his order, so they had to fight. Chapter 1284. One sect, one race, become strong on your own. Fight. A roar that sounded like that of a tiger echoed into space from Ninth Summit. It was Hu Zi's voice. Once he spoke, his figure was instantly reflected in Su Ming's eyes. With a body like a tiger, at the moment he walked out, Hu Zi threw a punch forward, and his vast physical strength erupted. When he seized the space to his left with his left hand, a huge spiked mace appeared in his hand, and he swung it at the cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier charging towards him. Booming sounds surged into the air. Hu Zi was located at one of the spots used by the armies from both sides when they came into full contact with each other. There were countless cultivators from Ninth Summit around Hu Zi, and they were all fighting madly in a life-and-death battle against the cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier. They fought for their continued existence. For their own lives. There were berserkers among them. In this battle, they showed off the powerful physical bodies belonging to the berserkers. The enemies they faced were the cultivators who had easily destroyed the armies formed by the union of the three true worlds, who had killed the fourth true world Sublime Paragon, fourth true Sacred Yin world to seal themselves, and the fourth true world to lay down a rune, no longer hoping to kill their enemies, but only hoping to struggle and fight back. Those people had swept through true Morning Dao world, and wherever they went, no cultivator could make them stop in their tracks. It could be said that they were an army of powerful warriors who had never suffered defeat. People from Ninth Summit were prepared to die, but even if that were to happen, they could not die in vain. They would kill a few people and drag them to their deaths for company. If they killed one, then they would have broken even. If they killed 2 people, they would not have lived in vain, and if they killed 3, they would have covered the losses they suffered. If that was the case for Ninth Summit, then it was even more so for the berserkers. Loud rumbles surged into space. The sounds of fighting were deafening to the ears and filled the entire galaxy while the battle was reflected as the most brilliant light in Su Ming's eyes. The people from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier had 6/10 of their cultivation bases suppressed, but even if they could only bring out 4/10 of their cultivation bases, they were still a force of power that was definitely not weak when they stood before Ninth Summit of Arid Triad's true Morning Dao world. After all, regardless of whether it was Dark Dawn or Saint Defier, their legacies came from the records of their second era. If Su Ming had not sealed 6/10 of their power, then there would be no suspense in this battle. The victor would have been decided long ago. Only once he did seal them was the battle fair for Ninth Summit. In truth, it was absolutely in Su Ming's power to seal more of Dark Dawn and Saint Defier's power, but if that was the case, it could not be considered a trial. That was why he only sealed 6/10 of their strength, allowing Dark Dawn and Saint Defier to have less than half a realm higher in terms of their levels of cultivation compared to the cultivators from Ninth Summit. The sounds of battle echoed through space at a volume that could shake the sky and earth. A large number of cultivators from Saint Defier and Dark Dawn surged into the gap in the rune, and the moment they stepped in, Ninth Summit fought back. The hundreds of thousands of cultivators had determined looks on their faces. When the two armies clashed against each other, the battle instantly broke out. From the moment they came into contact, there were a large number of deaths on both sides. This sort of battle tested a cultivator's personal power to its utmost limits. The loud rumbles from divine abilities rose and fell. The light from enchanted treasures and the intensity of the clashes formed ripples that swept out in every direction. In the blink of an eye, the shadow of death descended on the galaxy. It swung its arm, taking away lives as if it wanted to reap every single life in the place. Dark Dawn and Saint Defier suffered the greatest amount of casualties since they had invaded Arid Triad. It did not matter whether it was the block they faced at Arid Triad's gap from the three great true worlds in the past, when Dark Dawn and Saint Defier swept through True Morning Dao world later on, or when they went on an expedition to the other true worlds. They had never suffered a loss like this, when a large number of deaths happened immediately after they clashed with the enemy. After all, the reason why the cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier had been undefeatable in their battles was because of their strength. The 9 white-robed antecedental spirits gritted their teeth and rushed to the front lines. Wherever they went, the cultivators from Ninth Summit would retreat. There was no one who proved to be their opponent. They might have 6/10 of their cultivation bases suppressed, but they still remained powerful. But right at the moment the 9 completely stepped into the gap of the rune and entered the world where the Ninth Summit was to rush towards Huzi, who was the most frenzied out of all the cultivators from Ninth Summit. The sounds of waves tumbling suddenly came from Dao Ocean located beneath them. A great will instantly filled the space and enveloped the 9 people. They were instantly submerged by the will, which was as fierce as raging waves. It was the predecessor of Dao Ocean. Once he enveloped the 9 people in his will, a battle of arts belonging to antecedental spirits started. They were isolated from the cultivators, and when they fought against each other, not much bloodshed could be seen. However, to the 9 antecedental spirits, the predecessor of Dao Ocean was so strong that he was an existence that the 9 could not fight against once their cultivation bases had been weakened. At the same time, the berserkers in Ninth Summit showed off their pride as berserkers. Ever since their levels of cultivation had risen and they had gotten used to True Morning Dao world's presence, they went through another metamorphosis. It was a sudden rise in power due to accumulated strength and a power remaining in the berserkers' blood, which worked on a similar principle as the survivors of the great berserker tribe sacrificing themselves so that they could help their descendants. During the short period of time, the entire race had been continuously getting stronger, and in their madness, they now waged war against Dark Dawn and Saint Defier in the chaotic battle. Su Ming sat on the sea of white bones and watched all of this unfold before him. His expression was calm, and not a single change could be detected on him. If a person wanted to sharpen their blade, there would definitely be parts of it that would shatter. If a tree wanted to grow, then it had to be doused by storms. The Ninth Summit and the Berserkers were the 2 most important homes for Su Ming. If they wanted to grow, they had to go through various hardships. They had to experience all that would be needed for any force of power to rise to glory. Only by doing so could they grow to be existences that could touch even the sky. Only by doing so could they no longer need Su Ming to provide them with constant protection. They needed to become people who could stand tall and strong on their own from people who could only depend on others. The only thing Su Ming could do was to make the battle fairer. However, if Ninth Summit could not get used to this sort of battle, they would be saved by Su Ming, and he would make it so that Ninth Summit and the Berserkers would never show themselves. Because if that was the case, perhaps the time for Ninth Summit and the Berserkers to rise to power had not arrived, and it would be better for them to stay in Yin Death region, if that was the case. And if they could grow up, if they had the conviction and courage to fight, if they had the will to face the heavens, men, and all manner of living things, then Su Ming would use his full power to make Ninth Summit and the Berserkers become the strongest sect and race in the universe. This was the absolute truth. Su Ming watched the battle before him, and relief slowly appeared on his face. He saw Ninth Summit fighting back, saw their unwillingness to surrender, and their determination. He saw all their lives shining with the most brilliant light. And it was especially so for the tiger-like Huzi. As he roared, he brandished the huge spiked mace he held in his hand and cursed loudly while he swept through thousands of people. The loud roars he stirred up were shocking, and the honest look on his face could not be found. Instead, there was a ferociousness that shook the hearts of his enemies. And levitating in the space beyond Ninth Summit while in a seated position was Su Ming's headless eldest senior brother. He did not attack. The ones who attacked were the shaman souls surrounding him. As they circled around him, they let out shrill, piercing cries and occasionally charged forth towards the cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier. Standing beside eldest senior brother was second senior brother. The gentle man had a solemn expression that had never appeared on his face before. Order after order came from him. He controlled everything that happened in the battlefield. There were quite a number of cultivators who did not attack around him, acting as his defense. Further away was the 9th summit, and standing at its summit was Fang Kanglan. She stared into the distance with a calm expression. Su Ming's second senior brother was 9th summit soul, and Fang Kanglan was the berserker's soul, and Su Ming was no longer the sect or the race's soul. He had already removed himself from view and became the sect and the race's deity. As of then, Su Ming could indeed be known as a deity. If he could not be regarded as one, then there would not be any deities in the world. He had the will of 3 great true worlds with him, and he could make the sovereign of Dawn Yangpei shudder in terror before him. This was Su Ming. A faint smile slowly appeared on Su Ming's face, while the sovereign of Dawn Yangpei's face grew more anguished. He did not dare turn his head back and could only watch the battlefield, but while the cultivators from Saint Defire and Dark Dawn still had the upper hand, they no longer had the momentum of victory. 6/10 of their cultivation bases were sealed in a bizarre manner. This matter in itself had already dealt an incredibly big blow to all cultivators from Saint Defire and Dark Dawn, and it had also formed an unseen mighty pressure on them, causing their hearts to tremble. They should have fallen back, but due to the orders from the sovereign of Dawn Yangpei, they had to fight. The results from this series of events was that the morale of the cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defire was not strong. If 9th Summit's resistance had been weak, then the morale of the cultivators from Saint Defire and Dark Dawn would have slowly risen, but they had run into a battle they had never met. As the number of deaths increased and people from 9th Summit began choosing self-destruction before their deaths, Dark Dawn and Saint Defire's momentum was completely oppressed. Glory to 9th Summit. The cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defire heard the cultivators from 9th Summit shout those words right before they chose to explode. But that was not all. If they had just exploded, it would have been impossible to affect the hearts of cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defire. However, those people who self-destructed stirred up such a mighty power that it surpassed what should have been possible from self-destruction. What they only later noticed was that there was a large number of jade slips infused with chaotic energy tied to their bodies, as well as a large number of enchanted treasures that would self-destruct with them and self-destructing medicinal cores. All of them exploded along with each cultivator upon their self-destruction, causing the power of their explosion to instantly increase by several fold. This madness was enough to shock Dark Dawn and Saint Defire. This was not a single occurrence, and neither did it happen only twice. Thousands and tens of thousands of people did it. Powerful bangs reverberated through the universe, forming a ripple that swept through the battlefield like a huge hand, taking away the lives of people that did not want to leave. There were also berserkers among the people who self-destructed. Before they died, they cried out to the berserkers, and in their voices was the unwillingness to part with their people, but none of them hesitated in sacrificing their bodies that had already suffered irreparable damage. They self-destructed, and with the power of the explosion, they completed the final and most dazzling event in their lives. Chapter 1285. Sharpen the sword, sharpen the blades. When the number of deaths reached a certain point in a normal battle, the willpower of one side would crumble, and those people would scatter. However, during the battle on that day, before they died, even if their souls were destroyed by self-destruction, they became spirits in the other survivors' hearts, the medicine that stimulated their lives, and because of one sentence Su Ming said, they became eternal existences. All cultivators of 9th Summit and berserkers, I will not let your souls be lonely. Even if your souls scatter, the pieces will gather into you again. The berserkers and 9th Summit could not hear Su Ming's words, only the sovereign of Dawn Yangpei who was sitting below him. The moment Su Ming had spoken, a vortex appeared in space above the spot where 9th Summit's rune was damaged. It appeared without a single sound, and when it rotated, souls manifested, though they could not be seen. Those souls stared at the battle beneath in confusion. When they saw all that happened, shock appeared on their faces, along with even greater confusion. They were all cultivators of 9th Summit and berserkers who had died on the battlefield. The vortex continued rotating, and glowing spots that the survivors could not see manifested in space. As they gathered together, all the souls of the cultivators from 9th Summit and berserkers who had died because of self-destruction went to the spot where they had died. There seemed to be a supreme law in the galaxy which had 2 sentences written in it. And they were the 27 words Su Ming had said just then. The souls could not be seen, but they could see everything in the battlefield, including Su Ming, who was a huge sun in the distance before their eyes. That sun was so huge that it looked like an existence that even the galaxy of the true world had to worship it. I am the god of berserkers, was once the 4th disciple of the 9th summit, and am one of the creators of 9th summit. I, Su Ming, will create the 10th summit on this day with the will of Morning Dao, Immortal Sect, and Sky Hill. The 10th summit will be known as the Morning Summit. It will gather together all the souls of my people and the members of my sect who died in battle in my true world. You will stay there so you can protect the world for your sect and your people. You will be worshipped. You will enjoy having incense lit for you. You will be the souls who defend the sect and your race. I bestow upon you the right to not perish as long as the sect remains. Su Ming's voice echoed in space. The survivors could not hear his voice reverberating through the galaxy, but a mountain that resembled a sword appeared in space. It formed in an instant and stood towering over everything in the galaxy. The souls who drifted in the area looked at Su Ming, then bowed to him in excitement before flying to the mountain to become the first batch of imperishable warring souls in the 10th summit who would protect the world. This scene caused the sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei to tremble. He had witnessed the entire process from start to finish, and everything he saw filled his expression with shock and disbelief. This is laws being enforced once they are created. This is not him just changing a law. He is creating it. With one sentence, he created a law. This is boundless Tao, the realm after Avacania. Because there is no end to Tao, their words will make ships move, and they will do so forever without reaching their end. The sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei mumbled in his head, and his entire body was instantly drenched in cold sweat. Su Ming stared at the battlefield in the distance and at the souls who had manifested once more and would no longer scatter. The admiration in his eyes grew greater. He saw 9th Summit's resistance, and while it might seem chaotic, in truth, there was an order to it. Everything was done by the orders of Second Senior Brother, including the attacks right in the beginning, their actions to suppress Saint Defier and Dark Dawn to prevent them from regaining their momentum, and the series of self-destructions that happened during the battle after. All this was based on Second Senior Brother's plan. He had them suppress their enemies through a series of actions and weaken their morale while boosting their own. By doing so, he could also make Saint Defier and Dark Dawn's cultivation base disintegrate, though it could not be detected. With his method and the suppression, he could cause a large number of cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier to only be able to bring out 3/10 of their original power. Su Ming was smiling, but the sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei was in shock and his mind blank. He only managed to recover after a long while. His face was pale, without a single hint of blood to be seen. The battle was already past the point where he could change its tides. In truth, the instant the existence so great that he made Yang Pei's heart shudder appeared behind him, the results of the battle were set. Just who is he? How can there be such a terrifying monster in arid triad expanse cosmos? Damn it, all the old monsters are sleeping right now, and I've never heard of anyone waking up ahead of schedule. Legends say that they have been abandoned by the universe and are not included within the will of the expanse cosmos. They have already leapt out of its boundaries. When they wake, it will be a moment before the universe is destroyed. But this person clearly gives off the feeling that, like those old monsters, and even among them, he could be considered someone powerful. Boundless Tao. He is clearly a powerful paragon in Boundless Tao realm. Damn it, just how did he wake up? The sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei was no longer thinking about the deaths of the cultivators of Dark Dawn and Saint Defier or the certain defeat they would suffer. He was thinking about how to get through the disaster before their eyes. The 9th Summit. This old monster cares about 9th Summit to this extent? If I knew about this, there is no way I would have caused trouble to myself by offending 9th Summit. Fortunately, the one here is just a clone of mine. But even if he is just a clone, losing it would cause me great harm. Besides, if this person really wants to kill me, it'll be incredibly easy for him to find me in arid triad expanse cosmos, unless I run back to Dark Dawn's camp. While the sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei was feeling upset and anxious, the battle between the cultivators of 9th Summit against those from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier reached its climax. Hu Zi threw his head back and laughed ferociously. Wherever he went, the place where he stood would be like no man's land. He had always been powerful, and with his enemy's power being reduced by about 7/10, he became nearly invincible in battle. Unless there were some from Saint Defier and Dark Dawn who were still powerful despite 7/10 of their power being reduced, the others were not Hu Zi's opponent. But as for those cultivators who were still powerful after they had their power reduced, their opponent was Su Ming's eldest senior brother. He might seem to be sitting still in space, but all the shaman souls around him had already reached a state where they could manifest themselves. This meant that virtually every spot in the battlefield was filled with shaman souls, and so Su Ming's eldest senior brother was in every spot of the battlefield. Su Ming could tell that during the period of time he was away, his eldest senior brother's power had increased by a lot. The spell allowing him to make it look like he manifested versions of himself beyond his own body had made even Su Ming cast a few scrutinizing looks his way. Besides not allowing the real body of the caster to move, the spell was so strong that it allowed the caster to form hundreds of manifestations. They existed in every single part of the battlefield, and the power they showed was the exact same as the one possessed by what Su Ming remembered his eldest senior brother having in the past. Su Ming had also detected a hint of a faint antecedental spirits were coming from his unmoving eldest senior brother. This discovery caused Su Ming to look closely at him, and after his observations, he could tell that this antecedental spirits will belong to the predecessor of Dao Ocean. Seems like Ninth Summit and the predecessor of Dao Ocean have been getting along well. A smile appeared on Su Ming's face. He looked at his second senior brother, and a hint of admiration appeared on his face. Second senior brother's personal level of cultivation was not comparable to Su Ming's own, but his grasp of the battlefield, his schemes and ploys, and his ability to formulate plans were things Su Ming could not compare. Second senior brother had been able to turn Ninth Summit into an unshakable force and command it in a way that all of the sect's combat abilities were brought out to the maximum. Indeed, in these aspects, Su Ming could not compare to him. As the deaths of the cultivators from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier gradually made them want to retreat appear and the will to fight grew stronger among the cultivators of Ninth Summit and the Berserkers, Su Ming narrowed his eyes. The trial could not end just like this. Since it had already started, he would have it reach a state where the experience would be etched into their bones and their souls. Only by doing so could this trial turn into a brand in their souls. Only by doing so could he light up the souls to fight among the people from Ninth Summit and the Berserkers, so the sect and the race would be able to rise to power through great victory. He could also use the fight to make their names ring through Arid Triad, laying down the final foundation for their rise. Since all of you have chosen not to be lonely existences in this apocalypse, I will give you a future where you will be paragons, Su Ming thought in his heart. Brilliant light shone in his eyes. Are the cultivators from Dark Dawn only worth so much? Su Ming asked a flat and freezing tone. When it reached the ears of the sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei, his heart trembled. Senior. Hesitance appeared on Yang Pei's face. Dark Dawn, Saint Defier, fight against Ninth Summit with your full strength. If there is anyone among you who tries to retreat, then I will destroy your entire sect. Yang Pei shouted out with gritted his teeth. He was intimidated by Su Ming, and he sensed the shadow of death looming over him. At that moment, he could no longer care less about the others. He immediately ordered them forward, and his voice reverberated through the battlefield. His words echoed in the hearts of every single cultivator from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier who wanted to retreat because they had been completely suppressed by Ninth Summit and the Berserkers' momentum. It forced them to stop in their actions. You may declare war as you wish, but only I can declare an end to it, said Su Ming flatly. There was not a lot of might contained in his words, but they had a domineering air, which overwhelmed the sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei with fear. He's a star of disaster. He's definitely a star of disaster. Even when he was in his era, this person definitely had an infamous reputation. But how could this old monster have a connection to Ninth Summit? Bitterness appeared on the sovereign of Dawn Yang Pei's pale face. He stared at the cultivators who stopped moving back when his words echoed in space. There were quite a number who turned their heads back to look towards him. There was uncertainty on their faces, and even a hint of hatred. Roars of those who had just been sentenced to death came from the mouths of people from Dark Dawn and Saint Defier. They were immediately followed by their crazed attacks and desperate charges. Once they go through this madness, This sect and race will be able to bloom beautifully in arid triad, Su Ming mumbled as he watched the changes in the distant battlefield. The expression of each cultivator and the circulation of their cultivation bases could be clearly seen by Su Ming. It was just like sharpening a sword. If he only sharpened one side of the blade, it would not be complete. He had to sharpen both sides until they glistened in the sun, for only then could it be considered a sharp sword, and right then, Su Ming was sharpening the other side.